Welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm Aaron Porras, and today we're checking out the initial results of Israel's fourth repeat elections. But first, a word from our fearless political leaders.
הערב הבאנו הישג אדיר. הבאנו את הליכוד להיות המפלגה הגדולה בישראל בפער גדול מאוד.
אנחנו נחכה כמובן לתוצאות האמת, אנחנו היינו אחראים עד עכשיו, נמשיך להיות אחראים.
בשעה הזו התוצאות עדיין אינן בהירות מספיק, ואני מציע לכולם להתאזר בסבלנות עד לתוצאות האמת. אבל דבר אחד אני יכול להבטיח לכם. אתם, חבריי, ביחד איתי, נמשיך להיאבק על הערכים שלנו ועל אחדות החברה הישראלית.
וזה מדהים איך ככה, ממש, פתאום, אנחנו בעולם אחר לגמרי. עולם שמאפס מנדטים לסקרים, אנחנו בין 6 ל7, טפו טפו, אני מקווה בדרך למעלה, יש לנו שבוע וחצי להספיק הרבה דרך למעלה.
מה שהיה הוא לא מה שיהיה. בכוח שנתתם לי, אפעל רק תחת עיקרון מנחה אחד, מה שטוב לישראל.
All right, now, as you can see, political party officials are mostly projecting confidence on the morning of the initial results. But of course, wishing doesn't make it so. Several predictions totally busted with the majority of the votes now counted. And so far, the Likud has 30 Knesset mandates, followed by Yesh Atid with 17, Shas with 9, Blue and White with 8, Yamina, Labor, United Torah Judaism, and Israel Beitenu getting around 7, the Joint Arab List, Religious Zionism Party, and the New Hope parties with 6, and finally Meretz and the Arab Ram Party with 5 seats each. And joining me now to discuss is columnist for Newsweek and editor of HistoryCentral.com, Marc Schulman, and then political analyst and chair of the Zionist Horizon, Dor Harlap. Thank you both so much for being with us. Now,
Hi.
Now, Dor, I actually want to start with you. Share with us your initial reactions to some of these exit polls, because there have been some serious surprises. I think most notably Benny Gantz of Blue and White not failing to get into the Knesset, but actually showing strongly with about 8 seats.
What I see as the biggest surprise of those elections is the voter turnout, because in many places in the world we saw in the last months that voter turnouts during elections were very low during the coronavirus era. Okay, but here in Israel, where we all, most of us, had already took the vaccines and have ability to walk around and meet each other, and I don't know. Today, one of my best friends is getting married, and many people go to parties and concerts, and life is getting back to the way they used to be. So I was surprised by the low voter turnout. I thought it would be much, 71%, 72%.
Yeah, I believe it was 62%. It's the lowest it's been since 2009. Marc, I want to bring you into the conversation. Actually, same question. Were you surprised by some of the exit polls?
I certainly was. I mean, I was surprised. Certainly, Benny Gantz was the big surprise. I mean, we were all talking about would he make it. I had some idea that he would. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I said to myself, why is he staying in? Who is the average voter for Blue and White? Who could he possibly be? And then I met one after the other, after another, people who said they're voting for them. And I said, okay, there really are Blue and White voters. So that part didn't surprise me as much. And other than that, it was pretty much, look, Meretz made it in, but not by, initially it was 7. 5 is much more in keeping with the Save Me, Save Me, Save Me campaign that was going on. Merav Michaeli did well, and I expected her to. And of course, the biggest disappointment of the evening was the New Hope Party of Gideon Sa'ar, who basically went down to such a small amount.
Yeah, they were polling.
Look, last night was a roller coaster. 20s, right. And so was Yamina was in the 20s. Mm-hmm. Look, Netanyahu is really, really good at bringing back a good part of the right wing to vote for him. It's very much a me party in that sense, and only he can do it. And when Tzachri Negbi gets on the television and basically says that Netanyahu has the strength because it's God's will, and we start going to the point where secular Israeli is talking about Netanyahu being God's will for the Jewish people, then you know things are in a strange place, and people will just support him blindly at this point. Look, it's been a roller coaster, but the vast majority of people who voted based on the parties who said they do not want Netanyahu as the next prime minister, they were the majority of people who voted. And look, this is the fourth election in a row. The only reason we haven't had a government is the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu refuses to give up the political space. And if he would give up the political space,
I'm not sure that this is. I'm not sure that. Sorry, Mark, for interrupting you, but I'm not sure that this is accurate, because in the first elections that we had, the first round, the majority of people voted for parties that they thought will recommend and will be sitting with Netanyahu in the coalition. That Mr. Lieberman just decided that he doesn't want to do it right after the election.
He campaigned.
That's fine.
He campaigned against. No, in that election he campaigned against the Haredi draft exemptions, and that was a part. That was a large part of why he refused to.
And he made it very clear. Lieberman made it very clear he would not go into a government that would approve the Haredi draft exemptions. He left Netanyahu's government. I mean, everybody who's opposing Netanyahu left at some point or another. Right on the right, they were all part of his governments at one time or another, and they all left. So that's the reality. 4 times in a row, he has not managed to get a majority. In any other democracy, he would leave, and then in 2 minutes there would be a majority government made up of Likud and Sar and probably blue and white. There would be a right-center government, maybe without the Haredim, who knows? But it would be in 2 seconds the minute Prime Minister Netanyahu stepped away from the scene.
Do either of you
that's
see?
What this has all been about.
Do either of you see any changes coming? Because we still have about 10% of the vote, in particular the double envelope ballots, which doubled in quantity this year, upwards of 650,000 double envelope ballots. Do you see any changes coming to these polls? Because I know we're talking about mathematically a seat or two shifting from party to party. Do you think Yesh Atid might break 20, for example, or is what we're seeing pretty much what we're likely to get?
I expect a slight change. If I had a guess, I would say blue and white will gain 1 and Ram will lose 1. But that's just a guess. I don't think there'll be a shift from the two groups. There might be a shift of 1 seat, although I'm not sure how it would come about, but nothing that would bring us back to a situation. It'll either be 60-60 or 50 or 61-59. Obviously, the Haredi parties are not going to go up substantially by the double envelopes. I don't know how many of the Sikh people, a smaller number, voted than we thought. Overwhelming percentage of the Sikh people these days are from the Arab sector, so that could have some small impact. And the army vote, which used to vote very right, no longer votes so right. And in the last 4 elections, they all voted for Benny Gantz.
And they had a higher voter turnout.
We'll have to see.
Actually. Yeah, Dole?
Right.
So I took a look on the numbers, and I believe that if we'll have a change, it will be towards maybe 1 more mandate for Naftali Bennett. But I'm not sure that this will happen. Maybe nothing will be changing.
Bennett had hoped for that the time that he didn't make it in. He thought he would be pushed over by the soldiers, and of course he didn't.
He didn't.
He did not. So it's really hard to know. We'll have to wait and see. Again, last night what was unclear is we never knew which groups of votes were being counted. As soon as we started counting the real votes, it's similar to the American elections in the sense that suddenly when they all come from one area, the numbers change radically. And that's what happened this morning. I assume that a large number of votes came from the Negev or other Arab Israeli areas, and that's what changed the vote and got Ram in and changed the whole calculus.
All right, well, let's talk now again about Ram, because as an Islamist party, as an Islamist politician, Mansour Abbas, he's become far more pragmatic in the last couple of months, and he's positioned himself now between both parties. He's saying that he's willing to work with anybody who's willing to form a government seriously. But Likud obviously is very divided on whether or not to include them, with half of the Likud.
I'm not sure that Likud is really divided.
Half of the Likudniks are saying that they would absolutely include Ram if it meant avoiding 5th elections, while the others are saying absolutely not. But it sounds like by the numbers they might have to.
Okay, so
and look, it's very hard for me to see being able to get Ram and Ben Gvir in the same coalition. That really seems like a stretch beyond any sort of magical powers that Netanyahu has. It seems really hard to see that happening. It's not very clear. Mansour himself is very pragmatic. but he answers to an Islamic hierarchy as well. And I'm not sure they'll agree to going into a government that includes Ben Gvir.
Well, I mean, it doesn't sound like they've been.
Okay.
It doesn't sound like they've been very much against it. Up until now, he's been quite outspoken in the idea that he might join.
There are two parts to keep in mind. Number one, of course, until now, it's all been a question of trying to get as much leverage as possible and talking as much leverage. Remember what Ram vote really is. The Ram vote, more than anything else, is a vote by Arab Israelis against the joint list, against the promises the joint list made. I remember interviewing Ayman Oda before the 2015 elections, I think it was, and he was coming out extremely pragmatic. He was going to work for the Arab Israelis. He wasn't going to talk about the Palestinian issue very much, et cetera, et cetera. And the reality was he ended up being dragged back into the conflict once again, and the result being that the joint list wasn't able to have the influence it might have had in what the Arab Israelis wanted, which was to be more part of the mainstream. So
yes,
Ram
but Mansour Abbas have gone only for that ticket, and also the whole situation in the world and in the Middle East and also inside of Israel have been changed by Netanyahu, because Abraham Accords have changed. I would like to say that the way that we look on Arabs here in Israel and how Israeli Arab citizens in Israel look on the government and the way that we can cooperate together to make this place a better place for all of us, for all the citizens of Israel, is became much more simple today. And I think that Mansour Abbas doesn't want to go for these Palestinian issues and just want to give thrive and prosperity for the places who voted for him. I saw the list of the places that voted for him. They just want to have good life here in Israel, with vaccines, with good economy, with better life for all of us. And I think that I don't believe that Netanyahu would like to add this party to the coalition. I don't think this is going to happen. Not from their side and not by Netanyahu's side. But something like what's going on with the Yahadut HaTorah, with the United Torah Union. We may do that with them. Why not? To have someone in the coalition, voting with the coalition, but doesn't have ministerial responsibility.
But they do. United Torah has municipal responsibility. They just don't legally do it.
I was talking more about. I was talking about how it used to be.
20 years ago, that was the case, but it's not.
No, not 20 years ago. Sorry, the Bagats have decided only 2 years ago or something, if I remember correctly.
More than 2 years ago. That was.
Mark?
3 years ago, okay.
But the reality was that they had ministers. They just weren't called ministers. They were called ministers.
That's okay with me. If you ask me as a Likud voter, as a Likud activist, as a Likud analyst.
Go put that together with Ben Gvir. Really, the two does not go together.
Okay, they
put people in normal. I mean, in terms of their views, etc., and they fall within a normal range of views. We can agree or disagree on certain issues, but generally speaking, they're normal.
Thank you. Where can you sign up my card?
At my dinner table, etc. But Ben Gvir is not. I'm sorry, and the people who know him are even further over to the crazy side. And those people, I don't think, can sit in the same coalition together with an Arab party. It just doesn't work for them.
Maybe he will be outside the coalition, but voting for it, and maybe the Mansour Abbas Ram party will also be voting for the coalition, but not.
If that's okay, then it's really easy. It's really easy for the other side to create a coalition, though. I mean, if you're saying it's okay to have a coalition with these parties as long as they vote from the outside, then it'll take 2 seconds. There'll be a government on the other side. I mean, that's the reality.
Maybe they can do it, but I don't believe they can. I don't see Lapid have enough leadership to gather around all those parties, which range from a very wide range. And no, one guy like Ben Gvir, and he's the second guy, number 6 of the Noam's party, number 6 in the Tzionut Hadatit's party. Both of them, it's not really a big issue. It's two people, and
they represent some very scandalous views. Many would call them extremist. And it's actually, I wanted to bring that up because, the religious Zionist party's big showing, really, of support in this last election has been quite alarming for a lot of more, you could say, liberal Israelis, for lack of a better word. Why do you think that is, and how do you think that will actually
I see Meretz, okay,
You see
Meretz
Meretz?
party, which when in abroad, the ICC is taking calls against the state of Israel, and and Meretz is in saying, yeah, that's fine, that makes sense, they should do it, and now now we can see Nitzan Horowitz. I don't know what he's talking about right now in the frame, but okay, they are much more extremist. I don't know, why would you say that? They are out of the Zionist views in general.
No, that's not true at all. You can't compare the two whatsoever. You can't compare absolute racists who even Smotrich talks about not wanting to have his wife in the same room in the hospital when she gives birth with an Arab. I mean, Smotrich, who's the moderate person.
This is propaganda.
I heard him say it. What are you
talking about that?
I've heard him say it. I mean, he's the moderate amongst them. And you talk about Ben Gvir with the picture of Baruch Goldstein, a supporter of Kahana, who they would walk out when Kahana would speak in the Knesset. They would walk out because they would not want to be in the same building.
I'm not advocating for Ben Gvir. It's not my place in the world.
It becomes an impossible situation. But I don't think you can compare the two. Meretz believes in a Jewish democratic state. It believes in rights for everybody.
No, I don't see it. I don't see it. The voters of Meretz and many of the Labor Party are not going for a Jewish democratic party.
But though, again, I want to interject because why we could talk about Meretz, but the chances of Meretz right now being in a right-wing coalition as opposed to the religious Zionist is nil. Whereas with the religious Zionist party, I mean, this is a very real situation that they're going to be in the coalition, and that is scaring a lot of Israelis.
Okay, so we look in the situation and we see what is the alternative. So the first and easiest alternative is to go for fifth round elections. Okay, the second one is having a right-wing coalition led by Netanyahu, maybe with the help of Mansour Abbas. I don't know, but I would much prefer if it would be with Gideon Saar's help or with Benny Gantz's help.
Do you think that some of the parties that have vowed, because again, you mentioned Gideon Saar with the New Hope, who this morning said that he would absolutely not. Well, just this morning he said that he would absolutely not sit with Netanyahu again.
Look, Netanyahu.
Let me finish. Sorry. Okay, let me finish what I've said. We have only those two alternatives. Either it's a fifth election, or either it's this coalition led by Netanyahu. I don't see any other leader.
What about a very simple solution? Prime Minister Netanyahu says, "I tried 4 times. Like any other leader, if he tries 4 times, it's time for me to move on and it's time for a new leader to take over."
At least 52 seats.
So what? 52 is not 61, and he failed. So the reality is
that they only want him.
It's time for. They don't only want him. I guarantee you, the Haredi parties and the Likud would be fine with somebody else.
No. I'm a part of the Likud, and I voted for Gideon Saar, and I helped him in his campaign against Bibi last year inside the Likud because I thought some thoughts, but he lost. Okay, and I didn't go with him to his new party because I believe that the Likud should lead the state of Israel.
Okay, but I didn't say Likud shouldn't leave. It's time for Likud to leave without Netanyahu.
We had a democratic.
You had a democratic election two elections ago. Okay, you had an election.
Nothing has changed.
You know how often in parliamentary democracies, when a leader doesn't succeed in an election, he usually resigns right afterwards.
Have an elections now in the Likud, Netanyahu wouldn't win. In the internal,
he would win again. Of course, he would win, but that's not the point. It wouldn't be good for the country. What would be good for the country is for him to resign and for someone else in the Likud to take over, and then there'll be a government in 5 minutes. That's all. If anyone else led the Likud right now, there would be a government that would include Saar, would include Lieberman, it would include Blue and White, and there'll be a government tomorrow morning.
So again, if Netanyahu is the only thing stopping us, or stopping some of these other parties from joining a coalition and preventing fifth elections, I think it's fair to ask, at least, who's really to blame then for the fifth election? Is it Netanyahu who decided to stay in politics and
it's Netanyahu
arguably won 30 seats just now with the Likud, or is it the fault of the other parties who refused to sit with him?
No, excuse me. The fact of the matter is, I can remember him standing up there, Prime Minister Netanyahu, believe tricking without any tricks in terms of the rotation agreement, and then he violated it. Very straightforward. The reason we have the fourth elections is because there was no budget. The reason there was no budget is because now didn't want to pass it. The reason we had the third elections, Netanyahu brought us the third election. The reality is the elections have all been caused because Prime Minister Netanyahu refuses to move on. And that's the reality. Netanyahu, the person who said when Ehud Olmert was being investigated, that Ehud Olmert cannot remain as prime minister because he will not be able to differentiate between his own personal needs and the needs of the state. That was only when he was being investigated. Netanyahu has now been indicted. So the reality is, you can say that legally he can stay as prime minister. Yes, legally it's because of the way the law was written.
Politically, you don't have a better coalition yet, even though we have last night results and this morning.
I have a better coalition the moment Netanyahu moves on. The moment Netanyahu moves on, there's a coalition in 1 minute.
I invite you to join.
No one trusts Prime Minister Netanyahu to be a coalition partner. Benny Gantz learned the hard way that you cannot trust him.
Okay.
Gideon Saar knows him well and knows you can't trust him. So that's the reality. No one is willing to trust him. That's where we stand.
Why do you think Naftali Bennett of Yamina, who has also worked very closely with the Likud throughout his tenure and career in politics, why do you think that he is still willing to sit in this coalition?
He's willing to talk about it. He was forced into this situation because Netanyahu, what Netanyahu definitely is a master politician. So he managed to force him in a situation by basically saying to his voters, look, you're voting for Yamina, but they're not Yamina because they're going to go into a coalition with the left, with Gideon Saar, the leftist, or Yesh Atid, the leftist. The Yesh Atid's left, like I don't know what. But in any way, so he was forced into a situation to say, no, I can go in with both people.
No one is forced.
Believe me, he does not want to go into a coalition with Netanyahu. If he's forced to...
Oh, well, maybe he doesn't want to, but he has stated that he's willing to for the sake of the country. Do?
He hasn't quite said that yet. He's willing to discuss it.
Naftali Bennett, doesn't matter what he wants or doesn't want, okay? Life is much stronger. He wants to get elected again. He wants to be able to try to put himself in a situation that maybe he will be leading the right wing of Israel. So he understands that the voters in the state of Israel will not let him stay in the right wing, will not continue to support him if he will not go into coalition with Netanyahu. It doesn't matter what he wants or doesn't want. Okay, stop being such a babies. Okay, now I say, Benny Gantz, you got 7 seats or something like that, 6 seats. If you have only 6 seats and you cannot build a coalition that you will lead, so sit down in a normal coalition we have a party with 30 seats, maybe 31, I don't know the count for now, right now specifically. I think that the blame, it's pretty obvious, the blame for this 5th round is for those party leaders that says, I'm not sitting with this, I'm not sitting with that.
All right, well,
it's one person.
Well,
one person's been indicted. We're not talking about a normal situation. He is an indicted prime minister. Under normal circumstances, he would not possibly run again. That's the reality.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Unfortunately, though, this is where I'm going to have to cut it off. Thank you again, Dol Harlap and Marc Schulman, for joining us. It was such a pleasure to have you back with us. I'm Aaron Porras. Please tune in next time on Insider for more on everything Israel. If there's a topic that you'd like us to cover, let us know about it in the comment sections online. And finally, for more news from Israel, follow ILTV on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube and ILTV.tv channels. Thank you so much. Be well. See you soon.